Yeah, once the bishop came to life, this was a crushing attack, but bishop h3 needed to be found. There was, I called it multiple times in this position. Bishop h3 holds a potential draw. Not here, but here, bishop h3. There's potential for a draw and also mate with this, but it's difficult to say. Yeah, and that's tough. That's tough to spot. And sometimes God is on your side, and sometimes he really isn't. And here, if the yellow brick road was followed, this would have been winning for black. But life doesn't work that way sometimes. And that's just unlucky. There was a few points where you could have actually played super well here. Here, this was fine, I suppose. Apparently, rook e7 is the best move. That's fucking dumb. Yeah, you had to play a5 at some point in this position. Yes, you drop a pawn here, but you get an active bishop, and this you can trade here, and then you'll just be quite happy with this. This pawn, once you maneuver a knight around, come and get it. G7 was awful. Let's see. Yeah, G6 was just not a move. That was just shocking. I was like, well, what the fuck does that do? It does nothing. Spoilers. Here, you missed a draw tactic. If takes, it's mate in 2. And if back, then you take the rook with your rook. And if takes here, then you can take this rook as well, I suppose. But that's probably losing because your pawns are so split. So here you had to find back and take this. Yeah, this is rough. Yeah, Jello said you wouldn't find this, but yeah, that's rough. I saw this and I was like, surely he at least considers knight takes with check because he wins a rook, but yeah, it's difficult. This is drawn only because you have rook here, and after that you can either win a pawn or chase this knight around. Yeah, that's rough. But here there was the same idea, but unfortunately no. Here you drop that and you find this, but unfortunately Hayden has too much here and there's not much to do. Here there was an interesting idea. If you take, then this starts marching down the board and there's potential with your bishops. If here, then there's this and you have 2 connected passes. But it's difficult to say. And here, once again, there's this and mate. But that's okay. It happens. And we see here now the standings with Hidosu beating Board. We'll see Train Jumper at 4.5, Hayden at 4. Although technically, given points, it is... Where is Train Jumper? Because Train Jumper drew here, I wonder if it's actually... Let's see, I'm expecting Board to go e4 because he has never played d4 in this tournament yet, so... Yep, how could I have seen this coming? Rentai obviously looking for the Caro-Kann. I'm surprised he's playing it considering that he has PTSD of the fantasy variation. He's been beaten twice in it. I think Board should play the fantasy variation. That would be quite funny. But Board plays Knight c3. There's actually... it's interestingly, Knight c3 is probably not the best book move here. There's actually Knight d2 instead, which is a known book move. And Mikhail Tal sacrificed like 4 pieces in a game and delivered checkmate, and that was pretty wild. But knight c3 probably is fine. Here there's d takes. There's a6. There's g6 actually, g6. But yeah, takes g6 all moves. Again, Ren'Tai, having only studied the exchange and the advance, does not know what to do here. With c5 here, interesting move. So he plays d takes, and then there's a d4, this sort of gambit. Yeah, this sort of gambit looking interesting. This knight is kicked away, but interestingly, there is this idea, bishop c4. If you take the knight, you lose the queen by force. Knight d5 played instead. Knight d5, e6 looks a bit poisonous. But e5 instead, that's almost certainly better for white after knight f3. The gambit, maybe not so good here. After knight c6, there's knight takes e5, and if knight takes, once again we have an interesting idea, but bishop c4, perhaps more reasonable. There is bishop takes pawn, and what is this in the center? What do you call this? Yeah, white has castles. There's actually interesting move b4, defended by the knight. Yeah, it is a bit of a cancerous tumor, isn't it? Yeah, h3 is a fine move. If bishop here, then it's a lot of moves, I suppose. I'd really like to see this square threatened in some way. So there's actually an interesting idea, h3 back. Here, this pins the knight to the square, which is an interesting idea. You don't often see pieces pinned to a square instead of another piece. And if ever the knight is taken or moved, then yeah, you lose to the 4. And f6 is basically forced. f6, of course, being a bit of a weakening move. You have to have some sense there. But c3, I'm not such a fan of that move. Obviously, if takes, you can take back, but yeah, here we see knight f6, probably the most reasonable one. Here, bishop b5, it's not really worth it. Bishop g5, though, counter shot here. Here, there's bishop back to e7, and that kind of takes the bite out of b4. Hanging pawn. Yeah, the queen exists, unfortunately. Bishop g5, this is some position of all time. Yeah, here there's bishop takes, bishop back, bishop takes. Maybe rook c8 works here in this sort of position. We've kind of transposed into a weird Alpine Sicilian looking structure here, where the c pawn and the d pawn have been traded. And there's this. It almost looks like this d4 takes, and it's some weird Alpen sort of looking structure with this c3 pawn. But yeah, bishop e7, very good move by Ren'Tai. Now here h3 is found by board. B takes is probably the most reasonable move here. You have to be careful, though. There's a lot of tension between these pieces. All sorts of nasty threats. It's worth noting here that if bishop h5, there is actually g4. Because of bishop g6, there is c takes, I suppose. So knight takes knight. Here you want to play e takes. E takes. That's because the value is there is less value to a pawn than to a bishop, and so board finds e takes. You always want to look to take with the less valuable if you can make a threat there. Here, with all of this, tension, probably best is this. This position feels familiar, maybe. But this looks really good because, yeah, here, after takes, queen has to take. And then after b take, there's this, and, well, I mean, actually, if queen takes, you're threatening check, and not quite mate, but very, very, very close to it. If the d7 square was not covered, then we would have the infamous kit mate. But yeah, you have to play this and make the threat on this square. With this hanging as well. Because you just completely demolish all protection for the black pieces. But board misplays. Board misplays and plays bishop takes, bishop, and now there's bishop takes, queen takes. But queen takes is played first, and again queen takes bishop. And this is still good. After this, there is an in-between move here. Not only is d6 quite strong, but there is bishop b5 check. And the knight is forced back unless the king wants to move and lose castling rights. Let's see if board... But board does not find bishop b5 check, and instead plays bishop d3. Still completely winning here. Short castles looks quite good. This pawn is going to be a menace. This is like the opposite of the last game, where instead of board having restricted pieces, it's now Ren'Tai with the restricted pieces. f6 does not feel like a good move here. That weakens the king a bit too much. I see b4 immediately attacking this knight. Make tangible threats on your opponent. Force them to move. Make an expansion. There's a minority on the queen side. Attack it. b4 played. Where is this knight going? You can't go here. If you go here, then that's just sad. I mean, obviously you're looking for a fork here, but... yeah, so... where is knight gonna go? Can't go here. Takes. Can't go here. Takes. Can't go here. Takes. You have to find this move e5. E4 rather. And after bishop takes, even that is extinguished as this knight is trapped. E4 is found. You might be tempted to play queen takes, but do not. Bishop takes is needed, and then after bishop c4, there are a lot of moves, but queen d3 is the easiest way to resolve it. Board finds bishop takes, and then after knight c4, actually there's rook fe1, getting out of the fork. There's actually also rook AE1 inviting the fork. The idea is something like d6 takes, and then that pins the queen to the king. There is also queen d3. As I said, queen d3. The easiest way to get out of this, just keep solid, have all of your pawns connected. Rook ad1 is played though. And this is still completely fine, but again, there's a bit of counterplay allowed here, and I'm not so certain I like that. No. No. Castles is played. Yeah, rook takes pawn, but there's maybe queen there, and it's not simple position. But yeah, rook takes, and here knight has to come back to d6, I guess. But then these pawns start marching forward. Knight e5 is an interesting idea against the queen, but there's this move, queen f5. Look at that. Looking to threaten here and just remove the king from his home. It's not checkmate. It's always the f7 square, but, well, I mean, it's pretty close to it. Well, queen e3 is played instead. It's a bit passive, but it gets the job done. Here, black has to activate the rooks. It's pretty doomed if they don't. Maybe rook here even. You have to bring them together.